I'm Bronwyn Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions, and welcome to our weekly Facebook Live update. Welcome back to those who have become regulars to our Facebook Live updates, and welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. So our company, Pinnacle People Solutions, provides human resource services advice, solutions, support services, you name it, to regionally based small to medium enterprises and not-for-profit organisations. And we are here to help you. And we are also here to help your business, not only through these challenging COVID-19 times, but all the time. So please ask any questions that you may have as we go along this morning, and I will do my best to answer those as you ask them. Outside of this, you can contact me and my fantastic team anytime via Facebook, email, phone, website, YouTube, LinkedIn, you name it, we're there. The details will be provided for you in the comments. So I'd like to cover off breaking news since last Monday, the 31st of August. And in no particular order, there's been a few developments this past week, which is important for us to be aware of. First and foremost, interestingly enough, not surprisingly, unfortunately, we've seen another large employer in Australia be found to have underpaid staff. So this now involves David Jones, Country Road, and others under the international Woolworths brand. It's not associated with Woolworths in Australia, have been found to have underpaid staff by $3.7 million. So this includes department stores David Jones and Country Road Group, who've obviously joined a group of the latest major retailers to have underpaid staff, with the company being found to have be owing $3.7 million to more than 7,000 staff. So on Friday last week, the parent company of those two brands, Woolworths Holdings, which is a South African retail group actually, that it had undertaken an audit of its payment systems and identified payment errors back in late 2019. And the results revealed $1.35 million in underpayments to David Jones staff, affecting 6,200 staff members and largely relating to unpaid superannuation entitlements. And $2.36 million unpaid wage bill was discovered at Country Road, which includes brands like Country Road, Trineri, Mimco, Witchery, and Politics. And this involves about 1,100 workers. So, look, unfortunately, this retailer is just one of many large companies who've admitted to underpaying staff in recent months, joining other major merchants like Coles, Woolworths, Michael Hill, Super Retail Group, Bunnings and Target, all of whom have admitted to collectively hundreds of millions of dollars in unpaid wages. For those who've kept up on this, the Senate is currently undertaking an inquiry into the unlawful underpayment of employees' remuneration, which is due to report by early December. So we'll be watching that with interest. We have actually run a couple of webinars on payroll and making sure you're getting it right. So go up onto our website, have a look for those and the fact sheets. We will actually be covering this off again, employee payroll and employer basics, in our October series, where we'll be getting back to fundamentals for business in supporting Small Business Month. So we will be doing some further work on this so you can make sure that you've got your payroll correct. So watch this space. Okay, so the other big thing that happened, well, one of the other big things that happened in this last week is that Victoria's state of emergency has been extended by 6 months. There was a marathon sitting of the Upper House of Parliament last week, and that resulted in a narrow passing of legislation to extend that state of emergency for 6 months. So that continues to give the government and agencies significantly more powers than they would normally have in order to manage the situation as it's happening in Victoria. We do have an update out of National Cabinet from last Friday as it affects business owners and their managers and staff. All states and territories except at this stage for WA have agreed in principle last Friday, so that was the last meeting of National Cabinet, last Friday the 4th of September, to try and have border restrictions eased by December. The Prime Minister's made it clear he would like to see people back at work, people able to holiday with their families, have Christmas with their families. There has been an in-principle agreement around border restrictions easing, but what the mechanics of that looks like, we'll keep you posted, because that's going to be a work in progress. They also need to define what constitutes a hotspot for the purposes of their border restrictions, and they're going to be working on that as well. Given the dire economic forecasts and numbers that we've seen in this past week, both actual and projected, there's a big call from the business sector on the federal government to bring forward personal and company tax cuts, no matter the cost to the budget bottom line. The Treasurer has signalled that an increase to the superannuation guarantee may be abandoned. Of course, we're on track, well, we are at the moment on track for the superannuation guarantee to go up to 12%. I think it's by 2025, with a further increase to happen on 1 July next year. The current government has talked a little bit around the topic of the fact that that may not happen. But now the business sector is demanding that tax cuts, both individual and personal and company, be brought forward. So 6 weeks out, or we're now 5 weeks out from the government's delayed budget, it's the Australian Industry Group saying that the economy needs elements of tax cuts that are slated to start in 2022 and calling for them to be put in place by January 1, 2021. So watch this space. We'll bring you more about that and what that's going to mean for business if any of those things come to fruition. Okay, so our colleagues, friends, families, etc. in Victoria heard yesterday from the Premier about their roadmaps, respectively, for regional and metro Victoria out of lockdown. And I just want to give you an overview on that this morning. First and foremost, for our wonderful colleagues in regional Victoria. So regional Victorians are currently living, as we know, under stage 3 restrictions, but they will see some conditions lifted as soon as this coming Sunday, the 13th of September. But the state government has indicated a roadmap out of restrictions, including 4 steps that I'll take you through before reaching a COVID normal, and that COVID normal won't be able to be possible until a low case threshold of virus infections will be met. So the good news is that because regional Victoria is already at stage 3, they will be able to skip the first step, which applies to metropolitan Melbourne, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and jump straight into the second phase from midnight next Sunday, the 13th. So here's what we know that will involve. So from midnight next Sunday in regional Victoria, the second step will be a change to public gatherings, and some visitors will be allowed. So from midnight next Sunday, all of regional Victoria will jump straight into a slightly relaxed version of stage 3. Schools will start returning to on-site learning for students in term 4 with some safety measures in place. Public gatherings of up to 5 people from up to 2 households will be allowed, and babies under 12 months old are not counted in that limit. Outdoor religious gatherings of up to 5 people with 1 faith leader will also be allowed, and a single social bubble, which I think is really important given the impact we're seeing on people's mental health in this period of time. A single social bubble will also be created, allowing people who live alone to nominate 1 person they can visit or who can visit their home. So this will be very similar to the intimate partner relationships arrangements that the government have had in place. Outdoor playgrounds and outdoor pools will be allowed to open. However, many restrictions will stay the same. So there'll still only be 4 essential reasons to leave the home: education or work if it can't be done from home, exercise, getting essential supplies, and providing or receiving necessary care. There will still stay the same the number of people who can attend weddings and funerals. The third step for regional Victoria, they'll be allowed to move into the next phase when 2 conditions are met: a 14-day average of fewer than 5 new cases a day, and 0 cases with an unknown source over 14 days. And that criteria applies across all of regional Victoria. So if you're in an area that currently has 0 cases, for example, you're still going to need to wait until all of regional Victoria meets those 2 trigger points. When regional Victoria enters this next phase, there'll be no restrictions on excuse me, to leave the home, but people will be encouraged to stay safe. Up to 10 people will be allowed to gather outdoors, and a household bubble allowing up to 5 visitors from another home, but you can only nominate one other household, will be permitted. Hospitality venues will be allowed to seat patrons for the first time in weeks, as long as it is outdoors and there is a 10-person limit on groups. Private real estate inspections will be allowed again, but only by appointment. And real estate auctions in person will also be allowed to start up again, but they must be outdoors and will be subject to gathering limits. So this is all once those two restrictions or those two measures are met. Intrastate travel will also be allowed across regional Victoria once they get to that next stage. When Metro Melbourne catches up to the third step, people will be allowed to travel across the state. Some outdoor events will also be allowed to go ahead when the third stage is reached, subject to pre-approved plans. So the last step, or the final phase before COVID normal, the trigger point to lift restrictions even further in regional Victoria will be November the 23rd, or 0 new cases recorded for 14 days statewide, whichever one comes later. So when this happens, the limit on public gatherings will expand to 50 people outdoors, and households will be allowed to have up to 20 visitors. Adult education will be allowed to return to on-site learning as long as safety measures are in place. Hospitality venues will be allowed to host patrons indoors with a group limit of 20 and a total cap of 50. Real estate will be able to operate as per normal again, with safety measures and record keeping in place. And the limit on guests allowed at weddings and funerals will also grow to 50 people or 20 people if the event is held at someone's home. And finally, what does COVID normal look like? So regional Victoria will be able to move to COVID normal, as it's been called, when the following conditions are met. The state records 0 new cases for 28 days. There are no active cases in the state. There are no outbreaks of concern in other states or territories. When this happens, there'll be no restrictions on public gatherings, visitors, hospitality venues, or events for the first time in months. So how close is regional Victoria to getting there? So our wonderful colleagues in regional Victoria, the Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, has said that if cases in regional Victoria keep declining at the current rate, it's just weeks away from meeting part of the third steps criteria. So they're now looking at 2, 3, 4 cases a day in regional Victoria. And meeting the other trigger point for the third step, which is 0 mystery cases for 14 days, is also looking reasonable, says the Chief Health Minister. And that, as I said, when you're in regional Victoria, makes no difference whether you've had 0 cases or not. Everybody in regional Victoria is currently being treated exactly the same. Now, in terms of Metro Melbourne, the first step for Metro Victoria will begin again, the same, on midnight this Sunday night, the 13th, and we'll see most restrictions continue with a small number of alterations. So you'll still need, as a resident, to stay within 5 k's of your home. You'll still only be able to leave home for shopping, exercise, caregiving purposes, or work that is permitted. The city's night curfew will come into place at 9 p.m. rather than 8 p.m. So that's one of the small changes. It will change to 9 p.m. And one of the other changes is that residents will be able to exercise for up to 2 hours a day, which is up from 1 hour. The other change, people living alone and single parents with children under the age of 18 will be able to nominate 1 visitor to their home. So this is the same as for regional Victoria. You'll nominate another sole person and be able to visit each other's homes. Now, those social bubbles for single people, which I mentioned in the regional announcement, are being introduced in direct response to feedback that the government has had from those who've been isolated away from anyone else for a long period of time. And we're seeing some of the mental health consequences of that. The Premier has said that the arrangements would be similar to how intimate partner rules work for couples living in separate homes. Childcare remains the same. Playgrounds will reopen. Only those on permitted lists will be able to attend schools or adult education in person. Work, hospitality and retail restrictions will stay in place. Some real estate activities will be allowed, but auctions must remain online only. And we haven't yet seen any decision about elective surgery. That hasn't been finalised yet. We'll let you know. From the 28th of September, Melbourne will move to a second stage if the city reaches an average daily case rate of 30 to 50 cases over the previous 14 days. So if the city does achieve it will still have a nighttime curfew. Residents will still have to remain within 5K of their homes and will only be allowed to leave for the 4 permitted reasons I've mentioned. Outdoor gatherings of up to 5 people for 2 households will be allowed, with infants under the age of 1 not included. Childcare and early education will reopen, potentially. And schools will remain in remote learning with a phased return of on-site learning for prep to grade 2, VCE and VCAL students, and specialist schools in term 4. Hospitality, retail and real estate restrictions will continue, and more workplaces will be permitted to reopen. On the 28th of September, or with those case numbers applying, and only with those case numbers applying for the previous 14 days, construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade and warehousing and postal distribution centres will all move from being heavily restricted industries to restricted industries. That would allow about 101,000 workers to return to work, apparently. And in that sort of next stage, outdoor pools would reopen and personal training for up to 2 people would be allowed, but gyms would remain closed. And then we get to the 3rd and 4th step, which I'm not going to take you into detail for, because we'll give you the links to those, and they're very similar to regional Victoria. The 3rd stage would still see meat and seafood processing remaining heavily restricted. So, and in that stage, workplaces such as construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade and warehousing and postal distribution would go, as they had done, from heavily restricted to restricted. They would then go from restricted to being allowed to open with COVID safe plans. So if there are no new cases across the state for 2 weeks, Melbourne would move to the 4th stage on November the 23rd. And there would be the kind of openings that we mentioned for regional Victoria, but we'll give you the links to those so that you can look at them in detail. Okay, so today it's really important for our regional and Melbourneian Victorians to know what changes are coming in. Not a lot for this next couple of weeks, but a few things that might help, certainly for people who are living alone. Our advice, I guess, and actions that we would sort of mention for this week is more broadly than what we've mentioned this morning, which is to really think about how you'll be doing business in 2021 and beyond. The possibilities are really quite significant, and we're here to help you with that planning. Please scrap the myth that you can't get people to relocate to regional areas. They're planning now, so get in front of them. And have a COVID safe plan in place and display your credentials. Make sure that you've got your signage and contact tracing obligations met, and that you have good, robust health and safety and HR policy in place. Don't forget, particularly for our colleagues in Victoria, that you are responsible for the work health and safety of your staff, no matter where they're working for you, including from home or from other premises that you've approved for them to work from. Always a good time to review your arrangements, contracts, position descriptions, policies, etc. Keep up that fantastic communication with your staff. So those in Victoria in particular, with these announcements that have been made yesterday, keep up that good communication with your staff about what's happening, what impact that's going to have for your business. If you want some help with that, more than happy to sit and have a conversation with you about how you might do that. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. If you've got specific questions about your business, if you're one of our clients, no doubt we will already be talking to you in regional Victoria, but anybody else that you know who's living and working in regional Victoria that may just want to chew this over or has particular questions about their business, or anybody else across the country in a regional area, you need us to help you out, or you want to chew anything over, get in touch with us. Email, Facebook, our website, any and all, phone, of course, any and all means will be responded to. You please join our webinar, our weekly Wednesday webinar this Wednesday, where our consultant psychologist Jessica Pearson will be discussing mental health first aid. Our team is actually commencing our first Zoom mental health first aid session today. We've all done our pre-work. It's a fantastic learning opportunity for business owners, managers and staff, and incredibly important skills and knowledge come from doing mental health first aid to have in the workplace to support the more than 20% of us who will experience mental health illness and problems at some point in our lives. So I'd really encourage you to get on Wednesday and be part of that webinar. So tell all your colleagues, family and friends who want to know more about mental health first aid to tune in to Jessica's webinar this Wednesday at 5:30. In the meantime, please hug the people that you're allowed to. Please wave cheerily at those that you yet can't. Stay safe. Stay socially distant, wear a mask in public places, and if social distancing is not possible, wash your hands, keep up that great hygiene, and we'll really look forward to seeing you for our webinar on Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.